So the next story in Genesis is about Noah. Now Noah is Cain's great 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 grandson or his grandnephew. So the story of Noah starts off by saying it was the time of the Nephilim, also called the sons of God, who, quote, came into the daughters of men, and they bore mighty men of renown. Then the very next line states, and this caused great wickedness and evil continually. So God needed to blot out man. So the Nephilim were actually these demonic aliens or evil spirits which get into people and give them powers over others, but sooner or later these powers only cause great wickedness and evil continually as man hurts and enslaves one another. So God had plans to flood the earth, and Noah was tipped off about this flood and told to build a ship. So Noah was also instructed to catch a male and female of every animal and put them on the ark along with his family. And then after the flood, Noah emerges from the ark, and according to Genesis, the first thing he decides to do is start burning all the animals and birds that he supposedly saved as a burnt offering to God. And this pleased the Lords, who then established a covenant with Noah, and they called it a covenant or a pact with God. So because this story is absurd, down to the fact that Noah starts burning all the animals as soon as he gets done saving them, it's not to be taken literally, obviously. So the ark is a ship in this story, and in other places the ark is a chest that contains holy writings. So a more realistic interpretation of Noah's story is that maybe Noah had built something to protect some sort of religious writings or artifacts during a time of great upheaval or turmoil in the area. My guess is probably there was a great war happening, since there was so much wickedness and evil in those days. And everyone was possessed by these demonic spirits called the Nephilim. My guess is that a big war was happening. And Noah had preserved the holy writings of the cult, is my guess. Because after the story of Noah building an ark, his story quickly fizzles out. He plants grapes for a vineyard, and then likes to get drunk and just lie around all day, passed out in his tent, with no clothes on. So his younger son tells his brothers, Dad is in there passed out naked again. So his brothers cover him up with a blanket, and when Noah wakes up, this enrages Noah, and for some reason he curses his younger son named Ham. Then the Bible goes into a rant about all the grandsons and great-grandsons of Noah. And the Bible says that the sons of Ham include Canaan and Egypt. So this is probably a mythical code for what lands are cursed by the covenant and what lands are not. So Ham pissed off Noah, and what came out of Ham were Canaan and Egypt. And what we find out from reading the Bible is that Canaan was not influenced by the cult. So the cult sent their people into Canaan. And it also seems like this cult was also manipulating some of the high-ranking members of Egyptian society. So like I said, the cult came out of the Middle East first, because the Middle East was the area of the first civilization in history. So then the Bible has a brief story about a very strong group of people, and they're not named as a tribe, or you don't hear where they're from, but they're a very strong group of people who are working together to build not only a city, but an impressive looking Tower of Babel. And this pisses off the Lord, or more realistically, this pisses off the coven, the lords of the coven, who say, look, those people building that great city, they are one people with one language. And this is only the beginning of what they could do. Come, let us go confuse their speech and then scatter them abroad. So these cult members saw a great deal of strong people working together as one to build a great city. And this scared the shit out of the cult. So the cult of priests and witches and lunatics all went there with all their demon possessions and their alien powers and all their issues. And they wreaked havoc upon this group of people, who then had to abandon their plans and leave the area. And this exact same thing has happened all over the world and is now happening in America. Everybody of any influence, with any plan, with any individual or independent enterprise, gets attacked and surrounded by this military cult, and they are driven crazy and their plans are abandoned if they don't join up and give the military cult control over their business. And with this military cult in control, you don't see things getting better on this planet. Everything's getting worse. Then the next story in Genesis is the story of the infamous Abraham and his nephew named Lot. So Abraham and Lot are sitting around their inbred incest community in the land of Ur. And the Lord of the covenant says to Abraham, take your little retarded nephew Lot and go settle in a new territory not yet controlled by the cult. And that's Canaan, because we want to take over Canaan too. So Abraham's a little short on cash. So at first he stops off in Egypt and he pimps out his hooker of a wife named Sarai, later called Sarah. So apparently Sarai is pretty hot. And Abraham says to Sarai, tell the Egyptians that you are my sister, and when they see you, they'll want you. And he was right. The Egyptian thinks she's pretty hot, and so she's taken into the house of a local pharaoh. Now pharaoh means great house, or in other words, pharaoh means a rich guy in Egypt. So Sarai serves the pharaoh as a prostitute, because it says in Genesis, and I quote, for her sake the pharaoh dealt well with Abraham, and soon Abraham has sheep, oxen, donkeys, and slaves. But soon the pharaoh discovers that something is wrong with Sarai, and he finds out the hard way that she belonged to a coven of witches and that she was possessed by demons, because then the pharaoh sends her back to Abraham saying, what is this curse that you have done to me? Please take her back and lift this curse upon me. So Abraham probably gets more money and more livestock and then leaves Egypt. And he goes back to the Middle East, now a wealthy man. And Abraham says to Lot, we got so much stuff now, and we are both so rich with servants and livestock and silver. Let's split up the coven and gain twice as much land. So Lot goes to live in Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham moves into Canaan. So the next thing that you hear is that there's a big war in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you read the book of Genesis closely, it seems like Lot had a lot to do with it, because he and a bunch of other guys called kings begin attacking the original king of the area named King Chedorlaomer and his people. So King Chedorlaomer eventually wins, and he imprisons Lot. So Abraham hears what has happened to his nephew Lot. And so Abraham gets his coven to attack King Chedorlaomer. So Abraham wins, and then back in Sodom, Lot is reinstated as the mayor or whatever title he's given. And those kings that revolted alongside of Lot are given whatever possessions King Chedorlaomer owned. So then the Lord of the cult shows up and has another heart-to-heart chat with Abraham and says, you have done well, and we are now going to put you in charge of Canaan, where you'll be in charge of the local coven. Or as the Lord says in the Bible, and I will make my covenant between me and you. So the Lord needed Abraham to mark all his people, to symbolize his allegiance to the cult, by circumcising all the boys at 8 years old. So these ritual circumcisions were not done for any sanitary purposes, because the cult would wait until the boy was 8 years old before circumcising it, where it became something of a traumatic experience to have an old man grab your privates and hack off the tip of your penis. So this is a form of trauma-based mind control that was also used to symbolize their allegiance to a certain coven. Just like in Eden, to symbolize their allegiance to a coven, they were all kept ignorant and none of them would eat apples. They all took the coven's word that the apples were hands off, they were poisonous, you don't eat those. So the coven knew that they had control over those people in Eden. Now, many generations later, to show that you had allegiance to the cult, you would circumcise your son's penis at 8 years old. So after his meeting with the head priest, the so-called Lord, Abraham couldn't wait until he got home, where he circumcised every man and boy who lived on his land. And it said he had something like 300 or 400 people. So then in Genesis chapter 18, it says that the Lord again appeared to Abraham. And as you know by now, the Lord means one of the head priests of the cult. And these are Abraham's handlers who have placed him in charge of the local coven in Canaan. So next, 3 priests show up at Abraham's place, and Abraham treats them all like royalty. He commands his servants to slay cows, make bread, bring water. Then the 3 men say that they will cause Abraham's wife to get pregnant even though she was very old. So after being fed by Abraham, the cult priests say that they are then off to attack Sodom and Gomorrah, because Sodom and Gomorrah had done something to anger the cult again. Like maybe something like when King Chedorlaomer stood up against them and imprisoned Lot after fighting off Lot's forces. Now some years later, some other people in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah were finding out just why King Chedorlaomer was so angry, and what it was like to live under the rule of Lot and the cult. So the people of that area were standing up to them again. And so these head witches or priests stopped off at Abraham's joint to check out the coven of Canaan, and then they were off to destroy Sodom. So the storyline then picks up with Abraham's nephew Lot, who is in charge of the coven in Sodom. So the head priests leave Abraham's house, and next they arrive at Sodom and Gomorrah, and they go straight to Lot's house. And he too invites these cult priests in and treats them all like royalty, calling them my lords and offering to wash their feet. He feeds them. He invites them to sleep over, have sex with his wife, whatever they want, I guess. Yet the people of Sodom and Gomorrah find out pretty quickly that the wicked priests have arrived, and the townspeople surround Lot's house and demand that the priests come out to face them. So Lot, being the good piece of cult member shit that he is, tells the townspeople, here, I got my 2 virgin daughters, and you could have them for sex or whatever you want. Just please don't bother these cult member priest friends of mine. So this, of course, enrages the good people of Sodom, who begin to try to force their way into Lot's building while shouting, you are just as dirty as those witches, and now we will judge all of you together. So the townspeople try to get inside, but the priests call upon their alien buddies, and next the townspeople are hit. This causes them tremendous pain, and others go blind, and they go running off in fear. And then Lot is alone again with the priests, who tell Lot that they're going to use their power to kill the village. But since Lot is such a great guy, according to the lords of the cult, that Lot should leave this place and go to another city to live in.